This week, many homes around the world will celebrate Pesach. The usual translation for Pesach or Pesach is to pass over, from where we get our English word the Passover. It takes us back when the Israelites were slaves in Egypt. In Shemot, or Exodus 12:23, we read, "For Adonai will pass through to kill the Egyptians, but when he sees the blood on the top and on the two sides, Adonai will pass over the door and will not allow the slaughterer to enter your houses and kill you." So it was the blood of a lamb that was spread over the doorpost and the lintel, which prevented the firstborn's death, the firstborns of those houses. It was the blood of a sacrificed lamb that prevented the shed of blood of the firstborns. The verb Pesach appears 7 times in the Hebrew scriptures. How fitting. 3 times in the book of Shemot. 3 times it refers to the very literal act of jumping over or limping. And 1 time appears in the book of Yeshayahu or Isaiah. In Yeshayahu chapter 31, verse 5, we read, "Like hovering birds, Adonai Tzevaot will protect Yerushalayim. In protecting it, he will rescue it. In sparing it, Pesach, in sparing it, he will save it." So it looks like here we see a much more active nuance of the verb, not just passing over or skipping, but it conveys the idea of protection. So I think, and I'm not alone, that the very same idea, the very same nuance, it's in view in the verse that we've read in Shemot. So let's look at the passage again with this idea in mind now. So in Shemot chapter 12, verse 23, we read, "Adonai will pass over the door and will not allow the slaughterer to enter your houses and kill you." If you pay close attention, this idea is already there because it says that Adonai will not allow the slaughterer or the destroyer, as some translations use it, to enter into your houses and kill you. He will not allow it. So you can see there's a more active nuance already here. Professor Baruch Eilabin, he directly translates this word as protection. So he would say, Adonai will protect the door and will not allow the slaughterer to come into your houses to kill you. In the Brit Hadashah, known by many as the New Testament, we find the same gloss, to pass over. In the letter of Rabbi Shaul to the Romans, we read, "This vindicated God's righteousness, because in his forbearance, God had passed over the sins people had committed in the past." Here, we find the same concept, to pass over, now directed more specifically to the ungodliness of people. The word obviously is in Greek, paresis, and is something that goes unpunished. So, according to this verse, God had overlooked people's sins. To summarize what we've said so far about the verb Pesach, first, it means to pass over. Second, it has the more active nuance pointing towards the idea of protection. And third, the gloss to pass over is also found in the Brit Hadashah used by Rabbi Shaul with the idea of overlooking people's sins. So with all this in mind, what does Pesach imply? This is my go at it. The blood of the lambs could not substitute the life of a God-created, image-bearer, human person. Because think about it, if it could, why then did God need to stand by the door, preventing the slaughterer, the destroyer, to come into the house to kill the firstborns? See, the blood of the lamb was not enough to pay the debt. The blood of the firstborns had to pay. The blood of the lambs was basically insufficient. And that's why God placed himself between the destroyer and the firstborns. So, what was the role of the blood of the lambs spread over the doors? Well, we find the answer in Shemot chapter 12. We read, "The blood will serve you as a sign, marking the houses where you are. When I, Adonai, see the blood, I will pass over you." So the blood was for the Israelites on their behalf, in order that when Adonai would see the blood, he would spare them. In other words, the blood, it actually did not redeem any Israelite that night, but it pointed towards their future redemption, which God chose to apply that night in the saving of the firstborns. Let me say that again. The blood of the lambs did actually not save or redeem any Israelite that night, but pointed towards their future redemption, which God chose to apply that night in the saving of the firstborns. Their actual redemption was going to be much later, and it did require God to pass over many more times. That is what we've read in the book of Romans. And if we go back there, it also says, the same passage, that God put Messiah Yeshua forward as the kapara, as a propitiation, as a satisfaction for sin by his bloody sacrificial death. Because in order for God's justice to be satisfied, in order for people's ungodliness to be judged, in order for people's sins to be atoned, it was required a much, much, much bigger sacrifice than the Paschal lamb. It was required a sacrifice that could proportionally restitute all of our offenses to God. It was required the Lamb of God. What does Pesach means? Pesach speaks about God's character, his justice, his patience, and his love. And about 2,000 Pesachs ago, everything changed. God did not stay by the door looking at the blood of the lamb, because his wrath and his justice were finally satisfied by the perfect sacrifice and the perfect blood of the Son of Man, our Messiah, Yeshua. Shalom.